Well, it's buzzing inside of District E, powered by Ticketmaster, as we had the introductory press conference from the brand new head coach, Spencer Carbery. Let's hear some of his opening remarks at the podium.
It's been phenomenal thus far, and I just first want to say what an absolute pleasure and honor it is for me and my family to be sitting here and being named the new head coach of the Washington Capitals organization.
Well, Spencer was at the podium a few moments ago, and now he's joining us live here on our set. Spencer, welcome to D.C.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, we got to start off. You had quite the warm welcome arriving to Capital One Arena. What was that like when you and your family arrived to the arena and took your first steps here as the head coach?
Very humbling coming out and seeing the warm reception to the city, to Capital One. I couldn't believe it. I was a little bit in awe, but such a warm welcome to make our family feel so at home.
So Washington, D.C., and it isn't exactly Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and it's a completely different hockey environment here. What do you take out of your 2 years as being an assistant coach in Toronto, the fishbowl of hockey?
Yeah, I hundreds of things, but I think maybe specifically of just understanding the pressure of that market and the media, and maybe didn't really have a full grasp until I got there of how important and how every little thing mattered. So I took a lot of that, and a lot of what you learn as a coach in that is handling situations through that type of pressure, and how you make decisions, how you navigate in-game stuff. I took a lot of that.
Well, one of the things I was almost made fun of this. I don't know why they interviewed anyone else, because I feel like you've been interviewed since you were named head coach, not necessarily the assistant coach or the player that played in Charleston, but as the head coach of South Carolina. People don't realize that the Washington Capitals have one of the greatest relationships in the American Hockey League and in the ECHL in the South Carolina Stingrays. So you were already dealing with management up here on a day-to-day basis.
You couldn't be more accurate and spot on of the value that this organization places on all three tiers, and not just saying it, but replicating it with action. So there's constantly player development down in Charleston, working with the players. There's constant communication with the Hershey Bears and Washington Capital development people. So you're right. It's saying it and then also following through with it.
Yeah, I think it means a lot. GM Brian McClellan started his remarks talking about that relationship they have with their affiliates. Pretty cool, though, Spencer. Full circle for you. You begin your coaching career in the Capitals organization. Now get your first head coaching job in the NHL with the Capitals. What was the interview process like, and was it always Washington for you, or you wanted to see what else was out there?
I felt like just at the end of the year with us losing in the playoffs, or Toronto losing in the playoffs, and then starting to go through the process, my head was spinning a little bit. But I always, I'll say this, going through the process of trying to become a head coach in the National Hockey League, in the back of my mind, I had always felt like this organization just felt so much like home to me. And every time my wife and family and I would talk about making decisions and ideal situations and all that, it just kept coming back to the Caps organization. So that's the way that we felt.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you played for Jared Bednar. How much have you leaned on him and the other guys that you've coached with have gotten to the National Hockey League? Cale McLean on the bench in Calgary, Warsofsky. You look at the different guys you've been in relationships with, and how important was it to lean on those guys throughout this process?
Oh, I touched on it earlier. A huge amount of why I've been so fortunate is to have people like you just named, and Jared Bednar playing for him, and being able to lean on him for the last 13 years and ask him questions and pick his brain, and then going, like you said, Cale McLean, Ryan Warsofsky, and then into Boston's organization and being around Butch Cassidy when he was in Providence. And there's just been so many moments where I almost have to pinch myself, because I'm able to gain so much knowledge and different perspective that now makes me who I am as a head coach.
Yeah, and we look through this process over the years. You leave home, not really that far from Victoria to Cowichan Valley, and you play for a former Washington Capital.
Yes,
when the Caps first got good, Greg Adams was a big part of it, learned from Brian Murray. How much do you take away from those first coaches you had in junior hockey and then your collegiate coaches as well?
You're exactly right, Greg Adams, and he was a hard coach, and he was transitioning from owning the team and given a crack at being a head coach, and he had so much. I even remember back then, like, he had so many little tidbits of information that you could tell, okay, he knows what he's talking about and has played at the highest level. And he was a hard coach, but a great man. And yeah, you take all those little experiences as you go through, and that's something maybe that, again, to touch on, of just being a sponge and being open and listening and taking information, because you can learn a ton.
Well, you touched on it a little bit in your press conference, but I know a lot of Capitals fans listening to the stream, their biggest question mark is about how do you weave some of the veteran players with some of the young players and get this team to hopefully make a deep playoff run. What is your plan, and have you talked to some of these guys, and what are you most looking forward to coaching guys like Alex Ovechkin?
Yeah, I've talked to a majority of the guys already in the first couple days, which has been fantastic. And I think what I can say is this, is we understand where we're at of, okay, we've got to infuse and bring some young players along into this lineup. There's no question about that, and now it's my job to blend that, like you said. And I think with us as a coaching staff leaning on our veteran players, leaning on our leadership group, and also us as coaches to bring them along as quickly as we can and integrate them in and have high expectations, because I don't think it's unfair. A lot of people, and I get it, it takes a young player a little bit longer and it's going to take time, no question, but I don't think it's something that's not doable, of getting them caught up to speed as quickly as possible and infusing them in a winning culture, and they have an expectation to uphold.
Yeah, when I look at your path here, and I look at so many important things that happen along the way, I'm a big believer in guys that have been in ECHL, that have coached in the American Hockey League, and I think that's the greatest prerequisite to get into the National Hockey League. But when I look back, I was joking with Alexa just before this, there's grumpy veterans, there's proud veterans in the ECHL, and the same thing in the AHL. So it's not really that different than what you're coming into, other than these guys have won the ultimate prize, those guys that I named, and Backey and Kuzi and Wilson and Carlson, just so many of them, Ovi, of course. But you look at that, and now you're going to have to deal with those guys and the young guys. But how much valuable, experience do you think it was coaching in those other leagues?
Well, that you just hit the nail on the head of that's the exact way that I feel about it. Of coaching those, they're all competitive. They want to win. They're hard workers. That's why they are who they are and why they've been so successful. And it's the same thing in Austin Matthews, Mitch Martin. Those guys all want to win. They want to do the right things. They want to be coached. So, using those experiences, I think, is exactly what you touched on, and it translates.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been awesome, Spencer. I see your family over your shoulder. It looks like they're busy, but I'd love to even bring them in. It's a family affair for you, and your kids are having fun. Joby mentioned the headband. Alan, maybe you would wear the headband. What do you think?
Never.
Well, Spencer Carbery, welcome to Washington, D.C. I know the players are looking forward to getting started, and we're looking forward to having you as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys so much.
All right, it's time now for us to send it over to Al Koken with a special guest.
Well, I'm joined by Rob Kincannon, the president of the South Carolina Stingrays, who've been a great part of the Capital Development Program, the man who hired Spencer Carbery. What did you see back then that attracted you to Spencer?
Spencer has one of the hardest work ethics you're ever going to see in anyone in pro hockey. He's always the first one at the rink. He's always the last one to leave. He's a great communicator. He does a terrific job with young players, older players, and I think Washington got a great coach here, and he's going to be very successful.
But he was an assistant when you first kind of joined the organization. What was it that you saw? Because obviously there were a lot of other candidates. What popped out in your mind to him?
Well, he's a very intense person. I am as well. I noticed how hard he worked. His path to where he is today is very different than folks take. He was a Division III hockey player. I was as well, so I could relate to him there. He didn't play at the AHL or the NHL level, so he knew the definition of commitment and hard work. And then that was on display through his 6 years in Charleston, 2 years in Toronto, 3 years in Hershey, and where we're at today. I don't think that's ever going to change. And it's great to see that it's finally paid off.
Rob, you just mentioned those 2 years in Toronto. How valuable do you think that has been for Spencer to be where he is right now?
I think Brian talked about it. I think that made them more comfortable knowing that he was able to work with the types of players that are in the NHL and not just the guys who are at the lower levels. I think that was probably the last check mark on that box to see if he was ultimately ready for this challenge. Being second in the NHL and working with those types of players speaks to who Spencer is and what he can do.
Obviously, with the Capitals and the structure they have with the Ovechkins and Backstroms and Oshie, a very veteran core. But Spencer talked about it, Brian talked about the fact that they do have to get younger. When you saw him work with young players, particularly the development players in the East Coast Hockey League, where did he do his best job? Where do you think he can make some of the kids in Hershey right now take that next step?
Well, he's always on the ice. He's not one of those coaches who's going to sit in the room and during an optional skate, work on other things. He makes sure he's on the ice. He makes sure he works one-on-one with those guys, whether it's a video session in the room or on the ice. He's competitive as can be. He loves to play 3-on-3 at the end of practice with some of the scratch players and things like that. So he's always teaching. He's always working with the players. And like I said it earlier, he's a great communicator, and I think that's the key to this.
Before we go, I want to give the South Carolina Stingrays a real shout-out because as a part of this development program, everybody kind of focuses on Hershey. This organization has benefited majorly, as well as other organizations, particularly with the goaltenders that you guys have developed. Almost every Capital goaltender I can think of, and guys now that are doing extremely well elsewhere in the National Hockey League, started in South Carolina.
It's just a great relationship period with, when Scott Murray and Ole Colze come to town to work with our players. Jason Fitzsimmons lives there as well. Spencer over the years. All the players that have come through the door. And Cam Parker is one of your equipment managers. He worked with us as well. So the list goes on and on. We love our role in this development process. We love the relationship, and we're proud to be a part of this.
Rob, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks
Appreciate
for having
it.
me.
Thank you.